Welcome back to another special edition of Focus One. Today we're going to continue our immigration series with a focus on law enforcement issues. We started this series with a broad background discussion on immigration featuring New College professor Keith Fitzgerald. Today we are fortunate to have the City of Palmetto Police Chief Rick Wells as our featured guest. We hope to bring you an additional program that will explore the economic implications of both legal and illegal immigration prior to a capstone hour-long program that will feature both proponents and opponents of the major immigration reform bill currently being considered by Congress. First things first, allow me to introduce today's guest, Palmetto Police Chief Rick Wells.
Thank you, Frank. Glad to be here.
Coming on the show, Chief. Let's just start by talking a little bit about your role in this particular Palmetto and Manatee County community, and just the importance of the Hispanic community, or just the rich mosaic of components that we have, pieces of the community that we have.
Sure. I think that first, the Hispanic population is very strong in the city of Palmetto. They play a vital role in the economic growth of the city of Palmetto in regards to agriculture. Mm-hmm. They're a very big part of the orange industry. We have several packing houses in the city of Palmetto. I would venture to say that they employ 90%, if not more, of the Hispanic population that we have. So they play a very vital role in that. And that they are very much needed in that industry and relied upon.
A specific percentage in terms of what percent of Palmetto population Hispanic?
I think we're about 31, 32% now.
Fairly, yeah, quite high.
It has grown significantly here over the last 10 years, and as a law enforcement officer, as a chief, it's our job to protect them like we would anyone else. Mm-hmm. We don't decipher between undocumented or legal citizen. That's not our role.
Do you even know, I guess? I mean, obviously, so we have a significant portion of the Palmetto community is Hispanics. Some may be first, second, or even third generation citizens. Some may be recent immigrants, legal immigrants, maybe guest workers or others that are on a visa, and then you have a proportion that are undocumented or illegal. Do you even know the breakdown, or you just consider it one large community?
No, we don't even have that data mm-hmm. to indicate who is here that is undocumented and here who is here legally, unless we have an encounter with them. And usually that would be some type of a criminal activity mm-hmm. that we're investigating. But we don't decipher. We would probably not even have that information available unless we unfortunately were involved in a situation where we had to arrest an individual.
Let's talk a little bit about that. So under immigration law, let's just talk a little bit about immigration law, and then I think we'll talk about criminal violations. But under immigration law, what authority do you have to enforce our nation's immigration laws within the city of Palmetto vis-a-vis state government or our federal government?
That's a good question. We really don't have any involvement in that part as far as local law enforcement is concerned. If we do have a crime that takes place involving an undocumented person, then we take that person to Manatee County Jail, mm-hmm. and then ICE would come in at that point and determine the status, and then they would determine whether or not they're going to be deported or not. Mm-hmm. And they're not always deported. It depends really on ICE and what situation ICE wants to take on this particular person. A lot of people are here under visas. They're not all here, illegally,
right,
undocumented.
Right.
So ICE makes a determination on where they'll go with that particular person.
So you're focused and you enforce criminal law, and when a crime is committed and you hold or arrest a perpetrator, you then check the identity of that perpetrator, and then you may find out that they're an undocumented or they have their status, citizen status is questionable. Then, in terms of modalities, you then contact the federal government. You contact ICE, and then ICE will come in and determine what to do in terms of the immigration component, not necessarily the criminal act component of that. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, but to clarify, then I want to come back to just to distinguish for our audience violations of immigration law and sort of their significance, because it's not that straightforward. So, and then the role of local government. So. From the, with respect to people that have entered this country illegally, we don't know how they got there, but they're undocumented, they entered illegally. My understanding that is a federal felony, so there's a violation of criminal law. But from your perspective, and from the perspective of federal law, that's not your issue or your problem. You don't have authority really to go out and actively look for or search for undocumented workers. Is that correct?
That's correct, and and we don't have the manpower. Mm-hmm. That's why ICE is in place. That's ICE. That's their main role, is to discover undocumented people that have entered the country, and if they feel the need to deport them, then they'll make that decision.
And then I think there's often even a civil process for those that entered the country illegally. And just to follow up on my earlier point, my understanding is that if somebody overstays a visa, overstays a work visa or some other type of visa, that's actually a civil violation of immigration law, not necessarily a criminal law. And I think just the point that I'm trying to make is that even if you wanted to, with respect to local government or local police authority, it's really not within your purview to be targeting, looking for, or actively searching for illegal immigrants, undocumented workers, or enforcing what is under the purview of the federal government.
That's correct. That's not in our realm of authority. That's not something that we would even have the manpower to do, if that was a goal we had.
So there's both an authority issue and the capacity issue.
Absolutely.
Now, I think every community is different. There's a tremendous amount of diversity around the country, throughout the state and the country. So there may be other parts of the country, whether it be Texas or Arizona, where flows of undocumented workers, again, might be connected to certain types of criminal activity or other types of activities that are viewed as problematic. And there have been some police chiefs or law enforcement authorities that have expressed a desire to have more authority with respect to enforcing immigration law. Just a comment on other, again, law enforcement officials from other communities that might want to seek more authority. Do you think that's needed, or do you think they have what they need under, again, existing law?
I think we have exactly what we need. I don't see a trend in Manatee County, and definitely not in the city of Palmetto, where we have a high probable issue with undocumented people committing crimes in this county. Mm-hmm. I don't see that. In fact, we probably, I could count on one hand the amount of arrests that were made in the city of Palmetto over the last 10 years that were committed by an undocumented
Okay, this is an important point. So, from your perspective in your community that you work in, criminal, in terms of the perpetrators of criminal activity, undocumented workers, to your knowledge and experience up to this point, are not a really big component of that element.
No, sir. We don't have that. What we do when we do have a situation where they have violated the law, usually it's a driving offense. It's either driving under the influence of alcohol, right, or driving without a valid driver's license. That's the type of crimes that we see that are committed in the city and the county. That's when we have contact with them most often.
Mm-hmm. One thing, again, I don't know all that much about it, but I just wanted to touch upon it quickly. I think in the wake of 9/11, the 9/11 tragedy, under some of the Homeland Security legislation, there was a law that's referred to as 287G that was set up that allows for cooperative programs between local governments and the federal government with respect to immigration law enforcement. So, and I think there's 2 or 3 counties in Florida that have signed these agreements. They're called 287 Gs. We don't have one here, but just your awareness of that program. Do you have much awareness of it, or?
There was I don't know if that was the program per se. There was something like that was at the Manatee County Jail at one time, where there was a deputy that was assigned to ICE, and they had the computer system, the programs needed to check undocumented. That did not last here for whatever reason very long. ICE removed the equipment, and they no longer have that setup there.
That setup there.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess the reason I was just raising it is, in my experience, some of the states that were looking to change state laws with respect to increasing or enhancing the authority of their state and local law enforcement folks, it seemed to me they might have been duplicating what was already in place in terms of these 287G agreements, so that the communities that again wanted to take a greater role or more active stake with respect to enforcement of immigration law. There are some vehicles in place in terms of federal legislation that would allow communities to do that. Not too many of them take advantage of it, though.
Right.
Let me switch topics a little bit to, let's come back to the communities again. Given the fact that a third of your community is Hispanic, and enforcement issues are important. Can you just talk a little bit about the role of trust with respect to the broad spectrum of a crime and criminal activity? How important is it to sort of cultivate relationships of trust with that community, and how does or does not status of undocumented workers factor in to simply your ability to prosecute criminals?
Well, we work very hard in the city of Palmetto with our Hispanic population because of that fact that a lot of times they are victimized on a regular basis, and they don't have a large trust for police officers or police in general. Therefore, they do not report crimes that have been committed against them. So we work very hard with gaining that trust by being in their community, providing them with information about crime prevention, how not to become a victim, building rapport, building trust, being out there on a regular basis, showing them that we are here to protect and to serve them. They are a very big part of the community, and we treat them no differently than we would treat anyone else. The problems we have is getting them the information and them actually trusting us enough to report a crime and know that by doing that, they're not going to be deported.
Okay.
A lot of times victims think that if they call the police, regardless if they're a victim or not, they will be deported just for the simple fact that law enforcement has now entered their home.
So you do see that that nebulous status, or the status of an undocumented person, is a real impediment to that trust bond that you need in the communications. Absolutely. Or just a provision of information. Can we maybe talk about, just for a second, some of the types of criminal activity that this might be most problematic, whether it be perhaps domestic violence cases, or is it drug activity or gang violence, other forms of criminal activity? Do these cut across the Hispanic community equally, or is there, again, a particular area of crime that cuts across pretty deeply, and that it's problematic, again, the lack of trust in getting information and getting people to self-report victimization or simply information they might have about a crime that occurred?
Well, there's a few crimes that we handle on a regular basis involving the Hispanic community and them being victimized. Domestic violence is a big problem in the Hispanic community. And because that victim, that wife or that girlfriend are relying on that husband or boyfriend for income and for security, a lot of times they will not reach out to us, even though they're being beaten on a regular basis. So we work very hard with our victim advocates throughout the county, not only in the city of Palmetto, trying to get them the information that they need to remove themselves from that that violent situation. We have had limited success, but bottom line is they know that they fear that once the husband is removed, not only will he be incarcerated because of the crime that he's committed, but then in turn he may be deported and they have no income. The second thing that we deal with on a regular basis is robbery. Because the Hispanic community has a very difficult time securing their money in a bank because they don't always have proper ID and they're unable to open up an account. They keep that money either on their person or in their house. Well, the criminals know this, and they are victimized time and time again because of the fact they know the criminal knows there's going to be cash on hand. So we work with them as well, trying to do anything we can, knowing that they're not going to take it to a bank, because even if they could, sometimes they don't trust that they'll be able to get their money back. So we try to do what we can to limit the amount of cash that they carry at one particular time, how to secure it properly in another location in the house. And so, it's difficult, but we have made some progress in those areas.
So coming back to domestic violence cases, of course, I imagine generally, regardless of immigration status, if a spouse or a victim was financially dependent upon the perpetrator of a crime, you might have, again, that sort of reluctance to report and remove that source of income, regardless, again, of the immigration issue. But you think that undocumented status adds another layer to that, or another concern beyond simply incarceration. Is there any reluctance? How often do you find that the victims, again, of domestic violence might be undocumented and concerned that in reporting the spouse, not necessarily the spouse that they're worried about, they're worried about being deported themselves?
Yeah, well, and usually we hear that second party because they haven't contacted us. So usually we'll hear that from one of our volunteers or an organization that is working inside of the Hispanic community that will get back to us and say, this person has been battered by her husband several times. She won't report, but it's a continuous problem. What can we do about it? In the real world, when you have domestic violence going on, even if that woman that's being battered, she'll call us. She'll call us to remove the threat without fear of that her husband or boyfriend being incarcerated, because she knows that he will be returning.
Right.
Okay. And a lot of times we'll see.
So you'll step in and remove the immediate threat.
Remove the immediate threat, knowing that he's going to come back. There's other avenues that she can take to remain safe, and there's organizations to help her with that. But a lot of times it does not happen in the Hispanic community because they just don't trust that they won't be deported as well.
I'm just going to shift gears a little bit. Well, actually, before I shift gears, I just want to come back to that, just circle back to the issue of probable cause with respect, maybe not necessarily from your experience in Palmetto, again, because I think you were pretty clear about some of your priorities and where the lines of authority were, in terms of the priorities in terms of enforcing criminal law as opposed to immigration law. But prior to the change in the Arizona law, if there was local law enforcement authorities in other areas and they suspected a certain group of individuals or individual, they suspected or were suspicious about their citizenship status, they're not really allowed to question or ask without clear probable cause unless some other crime has been committed. That's right, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Let me shift gears and come back to or come over to the pending legislation in Congress. We could be here for hours going over all the different titles, but I want to zero in on a couple of areas. First, One of the initial titles is on the issue of border security. So the intent is going to be enhance or tighten the security that would reduce the flow of undocumented workers into the country. Any thoughts on how that might change, again, your job? Would that make things better, worse, or is it just a non-issue from your perspective?
I believe, as far as we're concerned, it's a non-issue. There's over 21,000 Border Patrol agents, on our border at this particular time.
Mm-hmm.
That number has risen drastically since 9/11. They put a lot of money and a lot of effort into securing the borders, and we leave that up to them. We leave that up to ICE and Congress, how they want to secure those borders. The best possible way to do that is really beyond my comprehension. I know they continue to feed money into agents, and it seems like that has been their primary focus, is more boots on the ground. Mm-hmm. We have a Hispanic community that has been here for decades. We have families that have been here, raised their children here, raised their grandchildren here. Their kids are in our school. They are in a situation where they spend their money mm-hmm. in our community. They work in our community. I don't see a drastic increase with our Hispanic population growing mm-hmm. because, as a result of lack of border mm-hmm. Control. We have people that have built their life in Manatee County and reside here and want to succeed here.
So you said within the city of Palmetto, there's a significant or sizable number of Hispanics, some perhaps low-wage workers that work in the packing industry within the borders of the. Any other sectors that are important? And again, I'll just come back to that issue of flows in terms of seasonal flows or in other areas of whether the economy in Florida is doing poorly or better. Do you see, again, ebbs and flows of the Hispanic community, or it sounds like you're saying we kind of had a fairly stable population for a while throughout the recession?
And that's what I see. I mean, they have not moved out of the city of Palmetto during the recession. They stayed here. They continue to work. Their children continue to go to school here. There's organizations that have worked very hard to help them further their education. These young people, they've gone to college, they've come back. We have several Hispanic businesses in the city of Palmetto. Some have been there since they were old enough to work mm-hmm. and have moved up. So I never saw an impact on the Hispanic community.
Okay. So on the issue of border security, in terms of your perspective and your community on law enforcement, it's just not much of a problem, and so the issue, you don't see too much in the way of changes on the border security elements. Let's come to the path to legal status. And so a big component, perhaps the most controversial part of this bill concerns with proponents are saying is finally pulling people out of the shadows and giving them some sort of legal status and a pathway, if not to citizenship, to something that's legal and not illegal. To the opponents, again, it's a path to citizenship. It's amnesty, and they're very much against that. There are lots of stages. It's not a very quick path. There are some penalties that would need to be paid, but ultimately, this is an effort that, if this bill were to pass, we shouldn't have anybody that's sort of nebulous in the shadows anymore. They would hopefully come self-report, be identified, and then they would be, again, put on a path where they'd have a checklist. Do you think that would change things for better? Would it make your job a little easier, a little worse, or again, would it be another non-issue?
I think it would allow law enforcement a better opportunity to identify victims. We have a criminal act to identify suspects, to have proper documentation, to know who we're dealing with, to help these people at times to, maybe get their money in a bank when they couldn't before, mm-hmm. Give them a little bit more security in their community, they would feel better about contacting law enforcement, I would think, and dealing with us, knowing that they have legally done what's required to remain here. So I think that it would give us...
It would be helpful, you think, on the trust factor?
Absolutely, that part.
Okay,
I know there's a lot of steps to it, and there's going to be a lot of debate, and
Right.
I'm giving you a very small perspective on how it would help.
Yeah,
law
I think
enforcement.
it's clear. You know, the devil's in the details,
Right.
obviously. Linkages and timelines and sequencing between border security milestones and stages of this process. But the simple point from your perspective, again, just to make sure that I got it, is that some sort of legal status for the undocumented community is going to be helpful in terms of enforcement of criminal law in the city of Palmetto.
Yes.
Because it'll help build some trust. Hey, just one other little component of that bill that probably doesn't affect anything that you do in terms of your professional status, but you're probably familiar with the DREAM Act, and then there's that piece of failed legislation was kind of rolled into this broader piece of immigration legislation. So, a quicker path to citizenship for children that were brought here by parents. And there's been some controversy. I won't put you on the spot in terms of who those people are. Again, some controversial remarks by a few folks in Congress. But your just take, you don't have to take, give or take, or perspective on that component of the legislation. Is it something that you think is a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, Frank, what I have to do as a law enforcement official, I have to take the politics out of all of this. Mm-hmm. I have to remove politics. Simple fact is that these children are already in our schools. Mm-hmm. They go to school every day. They're part of our society. They're going to graduate and they're going to move on. Mm-hmm. So I really don't know what all the issues are. This debate can go on for another decade. Those children are still going to be in our community, going through our school system, and a vital part mm-hmm. of the city of Palmetto and Manatee County. So politically, I'll let them handle the debate. But
I think you're doing a great job of keeping things simple.
Well, the children are not going anywhere.
And it's one large community.
Right. It's our job to protect them and to keep them safe like we would anyone else, and that's what we do.
Chief Wells, I think that about wraps it up. Are there anything else or any other thoughts you want to share on this issue before we close for today?
No, I think that it's important for people to understand that we're here to protect and serve all of our citizens and all of the people in our community. That's what we try to do every day. We work very hard at it, and we're very happy that we've been able to build some relationships in the Hispanic community.
Thank you, Chief, for taking some of your time and coming on the program.
My pleasure.
And explaining some of these issues to our audience. I'd like to thank our audience for tuning in. I'd like to thank METV for sponsoring this series on immigration. We'll catch you again next time on another edition of Focus One.